There have been few, if any, personages in history more revered than the Holy Prophet. It is true that Buddha, Moses, and Jesus are all revered by their followers to a greater or lesser degree, with some of them equating these great men with God himself. But unlike Muhammad, these personages were only semi-historical. In other words, a large accumulation of myths, legends, and fables augment these personages in the form they have been handed to us. But in the case of Muhammad, we have his life as it was lived by a man of flesh and blood. Even Philip Hitti had to admit this when he remarked Muhammad was born in the full light of history. Muhammad's birth was most unceremonious. He did not have any royal lineage like Buddha. He was not heir to any priestly tradition like Jesus was, nor did he enjoy the comforts of a courtly life as Moses did. His was the most unlikely circumstance for a man to make his mark on history. Born an orphan, he lived a poor man for most of his life and died a poor man. But most of the time, his stomach was empty and he survived consuming nothing but water and dates. He slept on coarse mattresses made of palm fronds that left their mark on his skin. With his wives, most of them widows and overaged, he lived in thatched huts equipped with flimsy cloth curtains. But more than 1,500 years after his death, his name echoes across the globe. It has become a mantra that can arouse and sway millions of people. In fact, Muhammad's life is itself a testimony to the truth of the message he preached. The ready alternative for someone who does not accept the prophecy of Muhammad is the opposite, one of considering him a dissembler, and not a minor one, for they will have to admit that he single-handedly deceived a huge chunk of humanity. As everyone knows, when Muhammad started his mission, he was alone. It was with great trepidation that he revealed his message even to the closest of his associates. So the choices we have to accept are either Muhammad as a messenger or Muhammad as a dissembler. Of course, there are people who willingly or not admit to the greatness of the Prophet without necessarily subscribing to his prophecy, but this stance is nebulous and smacks of escapism. They are unwilling to confront the real issue of prophecy with the seriousness that it deserves. A dissembler will certainly have his motives: money, fame, empire, etc. In the case of Muhammad, none of these could be attributed as motives. He was a successful businessman at the age of 40 when he first announced his mission. His claim of prophecy only weakened him financially, as he must have anticipated himself, for he was demanding a complete overhaul of the system, which earned him more enemies than friends. Fame could not be his motive either. At the beginning of his mission, he lived under constant threat to his own person. It was only by God's miraculous intervention that saved his life, and this is something that dissembler theorists cannot buy. Will any sane person posit himself in a totally antagonistic position with regards to his family, tribe, and community to seek fame that was nowhere in sight? The initial reaction at the Prophet's announcement of his mission was something that he expected. His closest family and tribe turned against him. Abu Lahab, who was not only his uncle but the father-in-law of his two daughters, publicly abused him and forced his sons to divorce Muhammad's daughters. Will a dissembler seeking fame embark upon a course that appears so destructive and bring about nothing but collateral damage to him and his family? It was not only threats and vicious propaganda that Muhammad had to put up with. Having realized that threats and persecutions were not going to deter Muhammad, the Quraysh tried to woo him by offering everything a dissembler might be tempted to accept. If he wanted to be the king, they were ready to accept him as their unquestioned monarch. If it was money that he was hankering after, they were ready to give him as much as he wanted. If he wanted to marry the most beautiful girl among them, they would even make provision for that. What was Muhammad's reply to these offers? He was emphatic. Even if they place the sun on my right palm and the moon on my left, I will not relinquish this mission. Are these words a dissembler will ever speak? It should be remembered that Muhammad declined these offers at a time when the prospect of his movement were fraught with all conceivable obstacles. For all these offers, the Quraysh only wanted one concession from Muhammad: he should not question the authority of their gods. Even his favorite uncle and guardian Abu Talib pleaded with him, but to no avail. Those who consider Muhammad to be a great social reformer but not a prophet with a definite mandate from God have something to ponder here. If social reformation was his only intention, he could have at least made some compromise over the issue of monotheism, but it was precisely on this score he refused to budge the least. When the Quraysh realized that neither persecution nor temptation could work, they resorted to the most agonizing kind of social boycott imaginable. They banned all commerce and transaction with the Prophet and kinsmen belonging to the Banu Hashim. Not only could none of them buy or sell to them, but nobody could marry their girls. This boycott lasted for 3 years, during which Muhammad and his companions suffered the most harrowing experience in their lives. They survived on leaves and brambles and went without food for months on end, but nothing could shatter their resolve. The impact of this was so hard that it precipitated the deaths of Abu Talib and Khadija, the beloved wife of the Holy Prophet. Can we imagine a man who didn't have an express command from God to remain so steadfast in his mission against such odds and obstacles? The dissembler theorists will have to explain. Anyone studying the life of the Prophet will be impressed by the nature of Muhammad's mission and the way he fulfilled it. Until becoming commissioned a prophet at the age of 40, he hadn't written even a single verse in a city where the gift of poetry was accorded with the highest honor. And then on a fine day, he started quote-unquote creating the finest verses ever known to the Arabic tongue. Its charm was so overwhelming that the Qurayshi leaders, including the bitterest enemies of Muhammad, stole off their bed at night to listen to it. Can we imagine any man endowed with such exceptional gifts to hide his poetic genius so fully concealed until he decides to make his bogus claim to prophecy? Those who deny the Prophet will have to delude themselves into thinking that this was the case. The literary beauty of the Quran is so surprising that the great literary giants of the Arabic language, from the old Walid ibn Mughira to the modern Taha Hussein, have simply been astounded by it, although neither of them were believers in its divine origin. The best way of countering the charges against the Prophet is by presenting his life in its proper light. An acquaintance with the life of the Prophet is itself enough for anyone with a right head to grasp the deeply flawed nature of the critics' charges.